Welcome back to the Market Wolf channel. This is the second lesson in the series on market lessons. And in this episode, we are going to learn how to place our supports and our resistance lines for price action. And this actually goes back to lesson 1. If you haven't seen that yet, please go back and look for it, because we are going to be checking out market structure from lesson 1, and what we're specifically going to be looking for is the accumulation phases of the market in order to place our support and resistance lines. So just relax, listen to the music. This is how I learned. I watched people that knew what they were doing, and I wish I'd had a lesson like this where it was just somebody charting an entire stock. So also, if you haven't done it yet, be sure that you go open up your TradingView account, and you should have that open by now if you listen to lesson 1, and you'll be learning some of the basics here with me on TradingView as we're going through this. So what I'd point out first is you have a zoom in tool over here and a zoom out. So you can click that to zoom in, and you can highlight an area, and then you can zoom in onto that area. And if it's difficult to see, you can come over here in this area, and you can left click, and you can pull down to consolidate that price down so you can see things a little more clearly, or you can pull it up. So that's useful. And for me, you're not going to see me coming over here and using these because I have a wheel on my mouse that makes that so much easier. So if you don't have one, you might consider getting a mouse that's capable of that. Now, let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is, I'm charting Tesla, but you can chart any stock you want to. The way I suggest you use this video is that you watch it, and then you go back again, and you pick out Tesla or another chart that you're interested in. And what I will do is I will leave key points, key moments in this video, chapters that you can click on and go to so that you can go back and review how things are done. So the first thing you want to do is come here and you want to click on this trend line tool, but on the arrow on the right side of it. And you want to go to horizontal lines. And I'm going to place a random horizontal line on here just to show. In fact, you know what? We'll just come to the tip top of price. That'll be our first resistance. You notice how right here I'm looking at that top wick of that candle. That's as high as price as Tesla got. I'm just going to place that right there. And if you need to search for Tesla, you just click this area, and you can have it set for all, or for stocks, futures, whatever you want. I typically keep mine set for all. And then I just type in the indicator that I'm looking for or the full name, and you should be able to find the stock that you would like to chart. So I'm going to change this color first of all. You can choose what you want your support and resistance lines to be. I like my resistance lines to be in blue, and I like my support lines to be in yellow, but that's just personal preference, and sometimes I will change those depending on the situation. The other thing you can do down here on this toolbar is you can grab here and move it around, place it where you need it, and we can change this font on this line. Now, most people like to be very precise. They'll use a 1 point or a 2 point, and the line is very thin, and you zoom in and make sure you have that line placed just so, right on top of that wick, just perfectly, and you can continue to zoom in to make sure it's absolutely flawless. Now, that's one option, and that's very precise, and that's what many people do. My own personal style, and you don't have to do it this way, but I like to have a nice thick line because personally, I like to see when areas are broken through. I want to see, because typically you get the candle wicks. I just like to see that we really have support, or we really have resistance, or we're really going to break through. And sometimes if you're watching a stock that you're in, it helps you not to panic. Because sometimes you'll get a quick wick down and they'll try and get people out of positions if they have stop losses on. Not necessarily that they are trying to get people out of positions, but you might have a zone of accumulation where it wicks down to and then quickly price comes back up, right? So these accumulation zones are important. So here's our first resistance line. It's blue. Okay. Now I'm just going to continue to chart this on the way down. And my personal preference, after I get that top line on there, I like to go to wherever price is presently located. And I'll zoom in there. I want you to also notice, and this really should have been at the beginning of the video, but the time frames are important. Now, you don't have to do your charting of support and resistance on the 30-minute time frame. I like to be there, and then I like to zoom out and get the big picture and perhaps do a little adjusting at that point. That's just my personal preference. I like it because the 30-minute just gives me some more precision. I had somebody recently tell me that this area of support that I called, this was on Webull, this area of support I called on the S&P 500 wasn't actually support. They told me that support line is meaningless. And it was on that day this past week when on Friday where price dropped. You can see I'm making this a little bit wider, where price dropped precipitously, and it stopped at the end of the day right on that support line. So now this is interesting. Here we see we have an accumulation zone through here. You see these arcs here. I would personally, since price is still in action over here, I would personally place it right about here, because you can see this area here makes a nice support for these areas, for this wick, and really kind of almost a resistance point over here for price. And then what you can do is you can come through here and you can check, is this a previous area of accumulation? And it is. You can see that there's a small area of accumulation here, and we've hit the top. And you can see that we've essentially gone right through an area here that's the average of kind of the top and what you can almost consider, like if you're looking at it a certain way, like a bottom, like when you're looking at this channel of price structure right here, this accumulation zone, it's come right across the top of this accumulation zone generally, and it's split these two larger price movements right in half to average those two candles. And that's fine. And you can continue this way, and you can see this is kind of a little mini head and shoulders pattern almost, and it splits that right in half. And here we have a nice support and resistance area too. Here's an area of accumulation. So you can continue back like that and make sure that this just all lines up nice, but there's so many on that line, right, that we know we've probably done a pretty decent job of identifying a support and resistance line. And right now, I suppose we could consider this a resistance line because price is just trying to squeeze up through there right now. Okay? And so from this point, I like to begin to work my way up to where price was located. So these are going to be more zones of resistance, and I just leave my line the same. I click over here, and one of the things I like to do is I want to find the big areas first, right? Like here's a really big move. I would just set that right there. And I'd look back, because this right here, we've got this area of expansion and contraction, right? We get price that expands and contracts. Well, here's the contraction, here's the expansion, here's the contraction. But this area right here makes me think that something important happened since this acted as resistance on 2 candles. So I want to go back and see if that's the case. And we can see here's a zone of accumulation where it's basically hitting the top, right? We have a wick through there as well. If we keep going back, we'll probably find something else. Look very close here, but right through here, right through this zone of accumulation. So that is an important spot. And you can adjust that accordingly as well. This can be very, very therapeutic, to be honest. I like to watch people chart, and I like to chart myself. So now I would say, well, about the bottom of this accumulation zone, we could go there, but I'd probably come right about here, personally. Okay? And I'd keep in mind that we have these wicks down here. And we'll talk more about that later. These short wicks, obviously price action, the candlesticks themselves fell through, right? So then we continue our way up. I see another big area right here. And you see I'm just kind of looking for the average. Like I'm looking right here. And I'm saying, okay, well that looks like it's about average. Let me lay it down. And now let's look across. Do I want to adjust that at all? There's a lot of accumulation through here. Is there any way that I want to adjust that? Maybe up slightly? Just a little bit? I kind of like that right there. Because that kind of cuts through these upper ranges of these candles quite nicely. And we see it's the top of major areas of accumulation. We've got the base of major areas of accumulation. And we just keep going. We just keep going on the way up here. Here's another area here. Maybe there. Maybe. Because we're also going to look right here, right? Look at all these zones of accumulation. Looking at the top. Could we raise it? I think I like it better. Right about there. I think that's what I like. And you might hear people think, well, this guy, look, I'm self-taught. And so if I notice something is a little askew as price action is happening and I'm not quite following on these lines, I'll adjust them a little bit. But, we're going for an average here, really. And you can play around with this, remember. It's important to know that things can change and don't beat yourself up. That's a nice large zone of accumulation there. A lot of back and forth action. And then right about here would be good. Because we got this wick right here and we got a little bit. These are mostly wicks through here, so that'll work. You could take this up to the wick. Some people like to do that. And oftentimes I will. If it looks like I've got a lot of wicks in a certain area, I might just keep it on all of the wicks. If it looks like, I have a few wicks, but I've got solid candlesticks, then, I might take it down to the base of the candlestick. I just keep in mind what I'm looking at when I look back at this and I see some wicking through there. It's possible for price to go there and leave and vice versa. So, now, that looks good. And what you can do is you can change your time frame and you can go, say for instance, to the 2 hour, and you can see how this will look on the 2 hour time frame. And you can check going back price action previously to see if some of these areas line up. And they do. Here's an accumulation zone. Here's an accumulation zone. We're essentially at the top of an accumulation zone here. And then this is when you could zoom out on the 2 hour and you could do some adjusting if you want to. But you can see where current price is and where the resistance was. And you can kind of see that here, but with one wick. And so really this zone right here, where it's slightly above, I would just leave this where it is. And I would keep in mind as I'm looking at the charts that, we might have some wicks above here, quick wicks above. We might get support, we might not, right? So you can continue to do this on your chart. And then we know price is, where's price action right now? Price action is right here. Okay, and now we would just change our color. And now I would call this, I'm going to come up to my candlestick base here. I'd call that an area of support, and now I'm just going to switch my color. I'm going to switch it to yellow. And that's what I'm going to use for my support lines for price action. And we can come back and see if this matches with previous areas of accumulation. It does. And you see I'm on the 2 hour. We can switch it back to the 30 so we can get super precise. And we can take a look at that and see. You see how it kind of splits those through? Like maybe I wouldn't have put that there. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. We'll take a look at what everything else was doing. I might come right about here. That seems fair. And then right at the base of this wick, perhaps right at the base of that wick, and then we'll look back. Yeah, see this little kind of head and shoulders pattern? You can start to see these tiny little patterns in here because this is all running in fractals. You can go down to these lower time frames, and it's all running in fractals with the same type of patterns. And so that kind of splits that little head and shoulders almost in half. Here's your shoulder, here's your head. And I just cut it right through. And so I kind of like where that is. I like that it does the same thing here with this larger head and shoulder and shoulder. You can see it kind of cuts the shoulders through. And we have these areas of accumulation, of course, right? Slight accumulation there. And we can go back further and see that this respects a big zone of accumulation here. So I'm generally okay with that. Here it respects a large zone of accumulation here. Right? So you just plot it out and check, and then you come back and you tweak it. You make sure that it's where you want it to be and what makes the most sense for you. Let's do one more. You can see the zone of accumulation here. I'm eyeballing that. And then I'm also at the same time, I'm looking back this way. What are we going to hit? Is it support? Is it resistance? Right, and this is also why I like to use the fatter lines because it just gives me more room to play. And perhaps we adjust slightly if we want to. Yeah, maybe right about there. You can see we cut this through right here. We're right on the top of that cup. These accumulation zones here. Accumulation zone there. And now you can see why these accumulation zones are so important. And now as you're watching price, now you're starting to see, well, where will price go if it breaks up? Here's a support and resistance level. If it breaks down, here's support and resistance levels. We know where the next moves are. So, very simple, very easy. Identify your zones of accumulation. Lay out your horizontal lines. Go back and check and make sure that they are all lining up appropriately with previous zones of accumulation. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. You can see we have this nice zone of accumulation here and then a top section of that zone. And you can see how, because of that, it really almost splits this in half. But yet, this line right here itself, in between, this is a support and resistance area. Right? So you just think about these areas in between as channels. Channels of accumulation. And you watch the price to see what it does. But up here, this is going to hold more weight, where these previous most recent in time order zones took place, right? These are going to hold more weight than way back there. So that's why we try and have these precisely where we want them, further up front to where price action is actually happening in real time. It's not that these in the past won't hold weight. They will. There will be some people holding in these areas, perhaps waiting to sell. There will be people waiting to come back in and buy there. But we want to go ahead and chart it out as closely as possible with these accumulation zones closer to where price action is. We need to respect those accumulation zones a little bit tighter. Okay? So, that about wraps up this episode. We've learned about our zones of accumulation. We know how to use our horizontal lines now to map that out, and our colors. Know how to zoom in, zoom out. You know your time frames. You know where to go to pull up your favorite stock. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section. And please feel free to ask any questions at all, because I will answer, I will respond. More than happy to. Look, remember the whole philosophy. We're learning so that we can teach, and we're teaching so that we may learn. And this not only helps me, but I hope it's helpful for you too. We'll see you next time. Lesson 3 on the Market Wolf.